What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. My name is Mundungus Creevy. I'm your host alongside my co-host, Cameron Parker-Poo, Gage Madrid NFL, and Glenn Hauser. How's everybody doing tonight?
Cameron Parker-Poo. Jeez, that's a new one.
You're doing good, man.
But you got to say it like Cartman. So,
Cameron Parker-Poo.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I had to think about it.
Nailed it.
And just in case anybody hears some buzzing in a microphone, just let me know. I'll bang mine on the table and it'll be fine.
Literally.
Just he was going to town.
They told me that it was. Show. They told me it was buzzy before we got in the show, so I just took it and went, "How's that?" And everything was fine, so it's okay.
But then he's gonna have to explain to his wife why he broke the microphone. He's gonna have to get a new one.
Exactly. So obviously we'll get to talking about how to fix the team through Madden, like we were doing earlier. It's just edit contract,
solves all the problems,
solves everything. But we did have the last game of the season against the Raiders, and we did not win that game. So we split the Chiefs, swept the Chargers, and we got swept by the Raiders.
I don't think that's how anybody predicted the division standings for the Broncos to go. I think everybody predicted us to get swept by the Chiefs, probably split with the Raiders, and then sweep the Chargers like we did. So we got one of those three right.
Yeah, and one of those things that obviously was a positive on the season was they snapped one streak, right? They snapped the Kansas City Chiefs streak, which I guess, obviously the Raiders streak is adding up. So I guess like in terms of like sheer optimism for me, I feel like if you were to ask me which streak I would rather prefer to break, it would be the Chiefs streak just because of how popular the Chiefs are now. But obviously once things start adding up with the Raiders now, it gets to be a little bit tiresome, of course. And especially considering it was week 18, you literally found yourself in almost Rick Bisaccia territory in essence, of like Aiden O'Connell starting, a possible window where you can maybe win that game. But no, I mean, kudos to the Raiders. They played their butts off. Max Crosby's an animal. So the Raiders played really well, and hopefully the Raiders can do the smart thing and keep Antonio Pierce. Not because we actually want them to, in the sense of like he's a bad coach, but like the fact it's the right decision. Like he's got the Raiders moving in the right direction.
Well, and there's a lot of rumors about Jim Harbaugh, and I don't want him to go to either one of the AFC West teams that doesn't have a coach right now. How
can the Raiders afford another high-priced coaching contract when they're already on the hook for $80 million?
Well, I mean, they're in Vegas, so gambling.
Yeah. Maybe they should fill up the end zone with some grass. But that would be.
Yeah. What do you tell a guy that's got 10 pair of glasses and cannot find not one of them? Squint. I don't know where I was going with that. I had an idea, and then it just
gone.
I got nothing. I'm confused as all hell right now.
Just to pivot it back to the Raiders. Just to pivot it back to the Raiders a little bit. They are going to have to conduct a coaching search per NFL rules, per the Rooney Rule. They're going to have to interview at least 2 external minority candidates. But again, man, no matter who they interview, I think Antonio Pierce just feels like the clear-cut and obvious choice, unless they reel in somebody like a Jim Harbaugh. But to Glenn's point, is Mark Davis willing to shill out more money that he's already on the hook for John Gruden's contract as well as Josh McDaniels' contract? Both of them were extremely sizable deals. We knew that Gruden's was 10 years, $100 million, and I'm not sure the exact figures on McDaniels, but it was also a very sizable deal. I don't think it was quite.
Well, I think there was
Go ahead, Cam.
A rumor going around that potentially the Saints want to add John Gruden onto their staff.
Yes, they do.
Would they pick up some of that the Raiders owe Gruden or no?
I don't know the particulars on that, but I mean, I know that how great would that be for John Gruden though? Like you get added on to the Saints staff, and you're possibly added on for almost free because the Raiders are paying a part of that contract, if you will. So I mean, it's just interesting, I guess, now to see, this is a separate point, but to see John Gruden back in the NFL, given everything that, and it's obviously not happened but I mean, it happened yet, but it's just interesting to see him back in the NFL, if you will, so, and as far as that Reddit post, just real quick, no, it is not real. It's just something that somebody started, in terms of a, concept art, right? That's kind of like the famous term,
for the uniforms, just to clarify.
Yeah, for the uniforms.
I didn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah. It has no merit. In fact, even we'll talk about it more, but the presser today, they also poured cold water, not just possibly on maybe uniforms this year, but at least in the time being right now. Like they said, it's a several year process. So can certainly happen this year, but I mean, but as far as just that overall, no. But I will say though, the thing that I found interesting was if you guys follow Mario Batanzi on Twitter, at Vitanzi Therapy.
Never heard of him.
Yeah.
Who's that guy?
A weird dude that just randomly posts biceps on podcasts or something. But he did say that it does kind of add up. It does kind of add up, though, with what he's been hearing. So maybe there's just some things that are just a little bit similar in terms of what it is. But I mean, hey, right now there's no merit to it.
Yep. I mean, at this point in time, I think we can all look forward to those uniform changes when they do happen, but there's no definitive timeline for that to happen. What's going on, Muhammad? Good to see you, buddy. But there's no definitive timeline for the Broncos to get new uniforms. So I think we can, at least for now, dampen those rumors a little bit. If we get the announcement this spring that they do get new uniforms in 2024, it may kind of catch some off guard and be a little bit of a surprise.
That should be the helmet, personally.
Yeah.
I actually disagree.
Brian disagrees.
I'm a little bit of a purist, and I think the Broncos should have the blue as their primary helmet. They've always had a shade of blue, except when they had the ugly mustard brown. I guess they did have an orange helmet in there too. But I think overall, this team needs to embrace their identity of a blue helmet and have the whites as an alternate. That's just my personal take on it.
To each their own. Yeah.
Yes.
One of the other questions that was asked came from Kamani. Is it true Peyton said the door is open for Wilson to come back next year?
That's a great transition. Yes.
We had Russell Wilson benched for the last 2 games of the season. We could talk about that whole situation if you want to. I'm just going to lay it out and say I blame Russ. So I'm over it. I'd rather just be done with it. But what's your guys' take on Russ and if he's going to be here next year?
I mean, I'll start. I think that, for one, let's just take it for what it was. They did say in the press conference today that, yes, there is a door open for Russ to come back next year. But I think the important thing to understand is it's also a public forum, and you never want it to be a smear campaign. And it's never been, to be fair, it's never been a smear campaign from that side of things. It's never been a smear campaign from that side of things. And so, they handled it the best that they could. And, even if they are going to be moving on from Russ, they're obviously never going to be publicly coming out and saying, yes, we will be moving on from Russ and we'll be taking on that, that pre-June 1st, cap hit and everything. So, I mean, they're just never going to come out and, tell us, if you will, what we want to hear. Right. And so you kind of have to interpret it as far as much as you will. And with Sean Payton, that's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm. And then with George Payton as well, he was the one who said that the decision to bench Russell Wilson did not correlate with the finances, even though that's a part that they cannot come out and say that out loud. It would open up a can of worms in terms of potential investigation with the NFLPA. It would be exactly what the Broncos are trying to avoid in this situation. I think that, and I've said this on the record before, both parties made the decision that was right for them. The Broncos were right approaching Russell Wilson about deferring the injury guarantees, essentially pushing the long-term decision on him back 1 year. That's essentially what they were going to do there. And Russ was also right to tell them no, because he would then be playing basically a season and a half unprotected. And that is not good business for Russell Wilson at all. The Broncos, again, were like, okay, that's fine. So we're going to make the right decision for ourselves, and we're going to sit you and not risk you having to go in for the final 2 games. And the only reason I feel like Ben DiNucci wasn't brought up to the active roster and made the number 2 quarterback for the final 2 games is that optical illusion that they had to create, basically, that Russell was demoted for performance-related reasons, with Peyton making the statement that he was just trying to give the offense a spark. I think everybody can read that and know it's BS, and know that it was just a cover-up that the Broncos have to say for the PR side of things in order to avoid a potential investigation from the NFL.
Yeah. So I kind of want to get your takes on, if Russ is not here next year, what are we doing? Are we doing rookie? Are we going after free agent like a Jameis Winston, for example, who's familiar with Peyton? What do you guys think we're doing?
Why not both?
Yeah, I think it's easy to, put yourself in their shoes and have an idea of what you think that's going to happen. But, I think we still don't know that answer. So by then it's going to just be all pure speculation.
Yep.
I think it's important to circle back on what Gage was talking about, that the Broncos were deferring his injury guarantees. They were we should probably reiterate that they were deferring his injury guarantees, which actually, in the grand scheme of things, and even Tom Pelissero even said this, actually meant that they wanted Russ to still be on the team next year, and Russ said no, right? Like, it's really important that we preface that. So as far as, moving forward with some of those other prospects, a lot's on the table. And I don't know if Sean Payton himself, and this is something that I've been speculating on my own behalf, but it's like, I wonder if he signed Jarrett Stidham in mind, knowing the fact that Stidham would be his quarterback next year, and then in doing so, draft his quarterback no matter what. And then, because again, like to circle back on the conversation, we were all surprised, right? We were all surprised why he signed such a lucrative backup deal, right? And so I wonder, if maybe Sean Payton's mind just views Stidham in this way, that he'll play a few games, 4 or 5 games, however many it takes for that rookie to be ready. So I think that there's absolutely a window where Stidham will play a few games in 2024. But I don't think you can, rule out the possibilities of guys like Jameis Winston, or maybe even a Gardner Minshew. Not saying that Gardner Minshew, will even move on from Indianapolis, because he's in a great situation with Indianapolis with a coach that he's been there before. But I will be really surprised though if he doesn't at least, dip his feet in the pool for some quarterbacks in the draft though. Hi.
I think that Stidham was signed so Peyton can cover his bases a little bit, just make sure. And in retrospect, with so many injuries and so many backups playing, these backup salaries are going to just continue to rise. So Stidham at $5 million may end up being a bargain next year when these teams realize that they need to have some solid play as a backup. But when I say that, I think he had Stidham just to cover his bases. I don't think that Peyton was expecting that the season would be under 500, not a playoff. When he said that he was going to be pissed if they didn't make the playoffs, I truly believe that he had every intention of the Broncos doing that and not drafting number 12 in the 2024 draft.
Yep, absolutely. And also when it comes to Jarrett Stidham, I feel like we can talk about his performance over these last couple of games, especially in the Raiders game. We can all probably agree it was subpar. Chargers game, I thought there were some things he did well, especially pre-snap at the line of scrimmage. And then he made some good throws on the run, stepping up in the pocket, good stuff like that. But the question becomes, is there an upgrade over Jarrett Stidham available to be sort of that bridge to a rookie, or do you feel like you can get a rookie who can start right away and you can just have Jarrett Stidham return to his backup role? That's really the question you have to have. If you don't feel like you can get a rookie that can start right away, that you may need to cover your bases a little bit, then for me, somebody like a Jameis Winston could make some sense. Gardner Minshew, if he does leave Indianapolis. Another one is Andy Dalton. Although he hasn't worked with Peyton before, he has operated in this scheme in New Orleans with Pete Carmichael last year and played pretty well for the Saints. That could be a potential option that could be relatively cheap as well. And
very cheap.
Yeah, very cheap. And he's been in the same exact role with Bryce Young. And excuse me, I actually feel like the Panthers would have been better off if they had sat Bryce early on and let Andy Dalton take some of that damage early on in the season. And I think that would have been maybe to the benefit of Bryce Young a little bit, because obviously throwing him into the fire right away was not to the benefit of Bryce or the Carolina Panthers. So Andy Dalton makes a lot of sense here, especially if the Broncos are trying to save some money. Let me look up and see what Andy Dalton's current deal with the Panthers is, because it probably would be a very similar contract.
Yeah. And Biggie Bronco mentioned Sam Darnold as well.
Yeah. I would rather have Sam Darnold than an Andy Dalton or a Jimmy Garoppolo for that matter. It scares me that his name is being brought up.
Well, scratch that. Andy's on a 2-year deal in Carolina.
Yeah. But that's not to say that they can move on.
And it was a 2-year, $10 million deal.
Yeah. Sounds familiar.
Sounds very familiar.
We do know that Jameis is good with Audible. We saw that at the end of the game. But when you're talking about a rookie that can just slide right in and start right away, like who are some of the people that you're referencing, Gage? Like some of the 6-year players like a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr. or even some of the other guys that are slated to go in the top 2, top 3.
I feel like at this point in time, it would probably be somebody who's slated to go in the top 2, top 3. Michael Penix, I only have very limited data to base off of him. I've seen his first Oregon game on All 22, which was not a great game from him, especially when you look at the All 22. And then I saw this past game, which again, there's some things that I saw
wasn't a good basis.
Yeah, make me a little bit hesitant on Michael Penix Jr. And then Bo Nix, I have not evaluated at all. Jaden Daniels, I have thoroughly evaluated. I am in love. I am absolutely in love. And I think that what makes him unique is that as he gets better with some of the mental processing side of his game, he can rely on his elite, and I mean elite special athleticism to cover for that. And I feel like Sean Payton is more willing to deal with a quarterback who operates in chaos if he can use it to his advantage, rather than Russell Wilson, who has kind of started to use it to his detriment, especially, being able to get out of the pocket and stuff like that. That's where Russell Wilson has had shortcomings. And I think Jaden Daniels could excel at that category and cover for some of his mental errors early on as he learns and grows.
I was going to say, I think outside of Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, you're looking at probably second-year starters after that. J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. Or like fringe, like they might sit for a couple games and work their way in.
Yeah. By the way, we should clarify, whenever you guys are commenting in the chat, be careful not to type in the other word instead of Penix, by the way. Just for full clarification.
I'll still bring it up.
No, it's just going to be a little bit tricky, obviously, of course, through this.
You're going to bring it up? Good.
Yeah. Just as far as draft evaluation, just be careful what you type there. But I think as far as just the overall quarterback, so I think it's fascinating this year, because I think
looking for
it. Because I think that I think as far as the quarterbacks though, and who they can take, there's about 4 or 5 candidates that do somewhat fit with what Sean Payton is looking for. I think if you're looking for the high end, as far as the high end, high end,
not penis, but Penix.
the high end upside. I think you're looking at a guy like those Drake Mays and especially the Jaden Daniels. Those are guys that are like the perfect situation that if you can find a way to get it and get those guys, you absolutely take it. But as far as guys like Penix and funny enough, I think Penix and Bo Nix are going to be fascinating because both are going to be up there in age. And I think that the difference between both of them, I think is, Bo Nix doesn't have the injury concerns necessarily as Penix. But I will say that Penix has an elite arm, and I think he's an absolute elite processor. but there's just times where he's a little bit more or too much in structure. And Bo Nix is a case where he was in an offense. We actually had this conversation before we went on air, but he's almost like the collegiate version of what you could be trading for in Justin Fields. Justin Fields was a quarterback that in structure played at Ohio State, but with the Chicago Bears has played out of structure. And it's the reverse scenario with Bo Nix, where in Auburn, he was playing out of structure. And with Oregon in the West Coast offense, he played within structure. So I think that, Bo Nix, he also doesn't have like the elite arm. He doesn't have the elite arm, but boy, he is accurate at times, like with his anticipatory throws and stuff. So he is really, really fascinating. And I think the more I probably would watch him, I would think that he actually would fit rather well with what Peyton would want to do.
Well, and we keep hearing all these people talking about how this college quarterback doesn't fit Peyton's scheme, and this college quarterback works in chaos, which isn't what Peyton wants, and all this back and forth. Is there actually a quarterback that fits best with Peyton, or does it really matter?
Well, I think that's the other twist of this too, and Gage, you can chime in also. But like, I think that the other part that we also have to factor in is, again, Sean Payton set out at the NFL for a year, right? Like so what did he learn being on the sidelines of that year? Because I think that the speed comment, and even George Payton talked about it in his press conference today, and about how speed is a big thing. Like, those kinds of comments would lead you to believe that they're going to try and mold their offense in ways like the Miami Dolphins or even, what is it? Who was the other team that they played that had a lot of speed?
Detroit.
Detroit. And especially in the sense of him referencing the Lions. Again, we should preface that again. Like, he even mentioned to Greg Penner and stuff that about the Lions and how he feels like they're very much like the Lions. So if he wants to build this team with speed, getting a guy like a Jaden Daniels or even a quarterback that is maybe a Penix, if you will, but you take a Penix and you build it like a Detroit Lions offense, it's a really perfect storm, if you will, for the Broncos if they can build it. Now, that's going to take a full rebuild, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And when it comes to Michael Penix, it's all going to be what happens in Indianapolis at the combine with his medicals, because he's had 2 torn ACLs and he's busted 2 shoulders. That is very concerning. For me, the shoulder injuries are a little bit more concerning than the lower body injuries, because as a quarterback, a shoulder injury can be an extremely detrimental injury. Although I feel like he's shown that it hasn't been plaguing him too much, especially in this last game. I mean, he has a cannon. He can launch it. There's no doubt about that. I feel like he needs to hone in on his lower body a little bit more. Whenever he's on the run, he has trouble resetting his base sometimes, and that popped up a couple of times in that Michigan game last night where he didn't set his feet and he kind of arm punted and sold himself short a couple of times. It's all about your lower body when you're throwing, especially at the NFL level. So he's going to need somebody who will help him with his mechanics. I think an off-season training session with Jordan Palmer might actually do Michael Penix some wonders in order to get his lower body mechanics more square, because Josh Allen talked about this. He is somebody who has obviously got a wild cannon for an arm, who had to hone in on his accuracy issues and throwing off platform with accuracy. And he talked about his offseason work with Jordan Palmer, connecting his hips and his base with his upper body throwing mechanics. And that is what changed Josh Allen's game and made him into the special player that he is at the NFL level. So I think Michael Penix may need to do some of that same training.
Well, we talk about all these quarterbacks in the draft that are going to go potentially first round, maybe end of first round, beginning of the second. Like, you got Caleb Williams, you got Drake May, you got Bo Nix, you got JJ McCarthy, all these guys. And then you have quarterbacks like the guy out of Tulane, Michael Pratt. You've got Cam Ward that you could go get in like the third or fourth. Do you think that the Broncos are going to make a move in the draft, potentially number 1 with the Bears? Because I don't think 2 or 3 is trading out, because they both need quarterbacks. So if Denver moves up, do you think they move all the way to 1? Do you think they draft something other than quarterback and wait on quarterback? Or what do you think the Broncos do in the draft?
I'm really curious. I think the Bears alone, I think the Bears and Broncos are going to have a conversation alone. Whether and And truly, I think the conversation will be surrounding the number 1 overall pick and Justin Fields. I think that it will be around both of those conversations because, you can't have a conversation without the other, right? Because, I mean, it would be pretty dumb business to have a conversation about solely Justin Fields and not at least be like, hey, what would it cost in terms of to get to number 1? So, but we all know that Justin Fields is the cheaper option. Like Justin Fields is the cheaper option, 100%. So I think that it's just about for them, what would it be to to fit their fancy? And I think that calling Chicago is the right call no matter what.
Yep, absolutely. Because for me, I think the Bears, it's leaning for me more towards them keeping Justin Fields and trading that number 1 overall pick and acquiring more draft capital. The question is, do the Broncos have the sufficient draft capital without a 2nd-round pick to go up there to that number 1 overall spot? I feel like there will be other bidders for that, unless the Broncos are willing to part ways with Pat Surtain, which I am not endorsing whatsoever. I don't want to do that. I think a more realistic option is maybe number 4 with Arizona. There's somebody else who they have a bunch of picks. They may want to get even more picks, really try to build that team around Kyler Murray at number 4 overall. Unless Marvin Harrison's sitting there and they take him, that might be a realistic trade option because I don't know, man. It's really, really interesting where you might be able to trade up because you got teams like the Giants at number 6 overall. They're kind of in a situation where they don't need a quarterback by force, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're not trading with the Chargers, and they don't need a quarterback. Tennessee probably doesn't need a quarterback with Atlanta or with Will Levis, and then they got Atlanta behind them who definitely needs a quarterback. So there's some teams that the Broncos may need to jump, and the most realistic scenarios there may be get like to number 6, number 4, or number 1.
Dan Patrick reported yesterday that his sources are telling him that the Bears are keeping Fields. They'll trade out of the first pick, and that even Eberflus is coming back.
Yeah. So he wasn't in the slew of coaches that were let go either. Yeah. I think it's so fascinating to me that the Bears find themselves in the exact same scenario that they were, last year. And just when everybody thought that, this was going to end up being the year where they move on from Justin Fields. It seems like they're going to be doing it, one more time again. And, talk about the amount of draft capital, the Broncos may be lacking a fair amount of draft capital, if you will, but talk about the Bears and the amount of draft capital they would be collecting over the years by just keeping Justin Fields.
Oh, yeah.
And let's face it, guys. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
watching Carolina finish out the season and knowing that they were going to be the worst team in the NFL and literally have nothing to show for it. They're doomed for years and years to come. I can't see a way technically out of this because they gave up so much to move up. I mean, that could be a situation that if the Broncos move that far up, we could be finding ourselves in the coming years, and that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, Panthers don't have a coach. They got an owner that's going to get sued for throwing beer on somebody.
I think he was recently fined.
Maybe he'll be the new head coach. The guy that got the beer thrown on him is going to be the new head coach.
So what do you think it would take to get up to top 3, guys?
Probably very similar to what the Bears traded. I mean, it was, 2 first-round picks, a third, and DJ Moore?
Yeah, I think so. Wasn't there a second in there?
I'm looking.
So my question, go ahead.
It was the number 1 selection for DJ Moore, 2023 first and seconds, and then 2024 first and seconds. So almost like the Russell Wilson package right there.
And that was to move from 9 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my question is, if the Broncos decide they want to do that and move to 1, who are they moving to 1 for?
I think it's really easy to make that. I think it's really easy to make that call just from the sheer unbiased perspective, which is they're making the trade up for none other than Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Like that. I think that with Sean Payton being on record and talking about Caleb Williams and the whole lottery system and how, possibly the fact that the lottery system being in place for guys like a Caleb Williams, I think that it's pretty easy to say it would be Caleb Williams. However, Biggie Bronco mentions this. I personally think the best. I think the best fit overall, as far as quarterback, would be a Drake May with the system that he would ideally want to run. I think his best fit dream scenario would be getting Drake May. So it would not surprise me if out of all of this, he praises Caleb Williams and with what he did in the media, and then he, pulls a fast one and takes Drake May. I would not be surprised about that one bit.
But then I'll counter that, Cam, with what if they are trying to build an offense that's predicated on speed? Would you want somebody like a Jaden Daniels to run that offense?
Right. And I think that Jaden Daniels is going to end up finding himself in the conversation like Anthony Richardson, right? That we saw this last year. Because I think that Anthony Richardson was a guy that you saw draft grades all across the board with him. But but as far as the common consensus was that he had the highest upside, which is something we mentioned just previously. And it's like, so if you have that and you have the idea of wanting to go for speed, Caleb Williams may be that guy. And I think that, it's worth noting that, certainly, quarterbacks from Lincoln Riley's system haven't panned out in terms of playing within structure. But if you put Caleb Williams in a structured offense of the capability of with Sean Payton, that's a nightmare fuel for teams, because that's putting Caleb Williams in an advantageous situation, for him to succeed right out of the gate. And if you can be able to do a fast rebuild, if you will, guys like a Jaden Daniels and playing him right away, or Drake May and a Caleb Williams puts you in the driver's seat of a rebuild right away.
So I kind of want to throw another hypothetical at you, and I know that we haven't really dug into the draft yet. We will at some point. But I kind of want to go with Gage's other scenario, right? Like we don't get 1, but we go to 4 where the Commanders were, right? At that point,
Cardinals right now.
Cardinals. Sorry.
Commanders are 2.
At that point, you're looking at Caleb Williams, Drake May being gone. So if we trade up to 4, what are we trading for? Marvin Harrison, Joe Alt, Jaden Daniels is going at 4. An overreach for Jaden Daniels at this point?
Not if you love him.
Right.
Yeah, not if you love him, because you've got teams like you've got Tennessee, although they've got Will Levis, man. If Jaden Daniels falls into their lap with this new regime who's got no loyalty to Will Levis, I guess Rand Carthen, the GM, does, but still, if you've got an opportunity to choose between Jaden Daniels and Will Levis, you take it. And then Atlanta, that's a no-brainer. You take Jaden Daniels if he falls to you. So The team you're really worried about there is Atlanta. That's why you may need to get to 4, because no way in hell you're trading with the Chargers. Maybe you could get away with trading to 6, but then you're risking somebody trading with Arizona. So if you're wanting to secure Jaden Daniels, I think you go to number 4 with Arizona, who I feel like right now is pretty dead set on taking Marvin Harrison to pair with Kyler Murray. So if it comes to realism, we might be looking at a trade with the New York Giants at 6.
Would I just at that point, I don't know if it would be worth trading up. Like if you're already looking at 2 to 3 quarterbacks gone, would it be worth trading up, or would you rather, well, goodbye, Glenn, or would you rather just like stay at 12 or trade back into the back end of the first? Me personally, I would rather either stay at 12 and go after like a Kool-Aid McKinstry or somebody like that, and then trade up into the second to try to go after J.J. McCarthy or something like that. Again, we'll get into all the draft stuff after the Super Bowl, but I'm just kind of going through hypotheticals here. Like, if you can only get up to 6, is it worth moving up to 6 at that point?
I think
Daniels is your guy. You do it.
Yeah. And I think that here's the thing, and this is going to end up being a long-winded answer, which is nothing new for me. But I think that, I think that we need to also remember that if you put yourself in the GM chair, and George Payne has referenced this numerous times, when they go through the draft process, they run a lot of different mock drafts, right? Scenarios that are going to possibly happen. So in the countless scenarios that they will, play out, if the most likely scenario is that they find themselves in a much better scenario to take this player that they will fall in love with at 4 or 6, and they know that he will be there, they will take it. And I think that the thing that we need to remind ourselves, and this is where I think as far as the Broncos and Broncos country, like I'm at the point where I kind of, certainly have fell into this idea of definitely taking the best player available. But the way that the Broncos have been the last 8 years have been nothing but taking the best player available. Not that that's bad or anything, but when you keep trying to trade and acquire Band-Aids, you will find yourself in the exact same scenario that they have been in for the last 8 years. And I'm tired of it. I'm actually tired of the fact of where the Broncos have been for the last 8 years. So if you fall in love with your quarterback, go out, fall in love with that quarterback, trade up for him or draft him no matter what at pick 12 or whatever, and go build your offense, mold it however it is that you want, and draft your quarterback at pick 12. I'm not going to hate on a certain pick like Kool-Aid or anything like that, but I'm at the point where with Sean Payton, especially this particular offseason after his last one, it's time for you to get your quarterback.
Yep, I could not agree more. This team has tried every other solution, it feels like, except for getting into the top 10 of the draft to get a quarterback. Yes, John Elway traded up for Paxton Lynch. Was that a world-beating move? Hell no, it was not. The Broncos have not been aggressive in the draft to get their quarterback. They obviously were extremely aggressive to go out and get Russell Wilson, and it burned them. They can't risk any of this toiling around with quarterbacks with like Drew Lock, a second-round pick, no more Teddy Bridgewater Band-Aids, Joe Flacco. It's just we cannot keep going through this cycle. We have to make a strong effort to end it. They did it with Russell Wilson. It didn't work. That doesn't mean you don't swing again, because if you don't swing, you don't hit.
And let's face it, Sean Payton is not going to be here like for 10 years, 12 years.
Right.
So he wants to hit and turn this ship and have success and get his legacy cemented right away. He wants a second Super Bowl desperately, in my opinion, because that would almost guarantee that he makes the Hall of Fame. At this point, I don't think he would get in. But I feel like all these factors do, factor into some of these decisions and such. So I agree completely with you guys that if he loves one of these QBs, and we finally have a coach that is not a defensive coach, has a great track record with developing quarterbacks and getting the best out of other ones, I think I could see that they're going to swing for the fences here.
So flying, no, go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, and just end it. That's why I think trading up for number 1 or just into the top 3 and 4 is a very real possibility right now.
Mm-hmm. And, in terms of acquiring the draft capital to do so, I mean, I know I don't want it to happen, but the Broncos do have a blue chip player on their roster that they could probably get multiple first-round picks for. And even outside of trading away PS2, I feel like we can now pivot back to having some tough conversations about other players the Broncos are most likely going to have to move on from this offseason. We may have to have the conversation of moving someone like a Justin Simmons. I know that would be a tough locker room decision to make. I'd hate it. But if you can get second-round picks for Justin Simmons in order to give you some of that draft flexibility, I think you have to do it. Cortland Sutton might be another guy that the Broncos can sell high on right now, coming off of one of the best seasons, if not the best season of his career. I feel like Cortland Sutton could net some really strong capital. Jerry Jeudy's another one that I don't know what kind of capital the Broncos would be able to net for him after his kind of roller coaster of a season this past year, but he's somebody else that I feel like could be a potential departure. Tim Patrick, I think Timmy P might be more open to restructuring his deal so he can stay in Denver.
Restructuring again, because I think he restructured this last season, so he might be able to restructure again.
Yeah, I think Timmy P, I know, loves the city, loves the team. He'd be a great mentor, especially if we do move on from Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Timmy P's already our longest tenured wide receiver. He'd still fill that role. I think that that's going to be a situation where the Broncos approach Timmy P about a restructure and he actually says, yeah, let's do it. because that might be his best option realistically, you know? So those are some moves that the Broncos might have to make moving on from guys like Cortland Sutton, Justin Simmons, maybe even a PS2 if they are trying to get the draft capital that they want to A, get their quarterback, and B, possibly get some other blue chip players. That wouldn't be conducive to moving PS2. The only way you move PS2 is if you're getting your quarterback.
Yeah. Biggie Bronco wants to know, if we're trading away the players, do we take all the money hit in one season? I'm assuming he means for the Russell Wilson money hit.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, the only way to have it spread out between the next two seasons is to keep him on the team.
I think what is it? ESPN came out with the report or something that said the most likely scenario is that they'll spread the $85 million out from 2024 to 2025. I think they said that's the most likely outcome. I wouldn't be opposed to them just biting the bullet and doing it all in 1 year. But I think that, it's worth noting regardless if they do all of that, they will still have some financial flexibility to where if they take the $85 million, it might force them to maybe make more moves, right? More moves to where you will be talking a little bit about a Simmons or, DJ Jones or some of these other players of getting off the cap and, moving some of those players. So I think it certainly offers that opportunity where if they hit the 85, you're talking about more of a panic situation of, even if you didn't trade it up, you're still talking about trading guys like Judy or maybe even a Sutton or maybe even a Simmons or any of those players. So I think it's far likely that's a doom and gloom situation if you're taking the full 85, because you're already going to be behind the cap or dead in the cap anyway. So I think it's easier for you to do the spread it out, of course in the 2 years. So I think at that situation, you're still talking about a scenario where Simmons will be here, and in some other situations, and then you're starting to be a little bit more flexible at that.
I'm glad you brought up DJ Jones.
Sorry, you said the 2 year spread out as if they do post June 1st, right?
Yes.
Between two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's no benefit to you don't save anything by taking it and ripping the Band-Aid off in season one, right, guys? So why not spread it out?
You're saving a $49 million dead cap hit in 2025, which is probably the year that you're looking to be competitive, especially if you were to take a rookie quarterback. So that is one advantage I could see. You're just accepting that 2024 is going to be a year of growth, development with a young quarterback and a lot of Band-Aid cheap free agents, because that's something else that George Payton talked about today is he doesn't anticipate the Broncos being nearly as active in free agency as they've been in the last 2 years. They probably won't be active in the first wave. They might focus more on like that second, third wave where you get some more of those like B, C tier level players who can fill those holes on your roster for the time being, but aren't long-term solutions to the equation. Maybe someone like a Fabian Moreau, who for part of the year was playing well for us and last couple of games really not playing very well. That could be a realistic scenario. Just band-aiding a lot of these positions. I'm glad that Cam brought up DJ Jones, because he's somebody I feel like is going to get cut almost no matter what. Financially, it makes too much sense. The Broncos are looking to rebuild their front seven almost completely. DJ Jones feels like a very expendable piece at this point in time. So he's one of those ones that feels like an easy decision to cut at this point in time.
No, I did want to bring up Bill's comment. Bite your tongue, Gage. No Simmons or Sutton Sertan trade. No. I do think we're at the point where we are going to have to move on from some players, in my opinion, just from what I've seen, what I've read, what I've heard. I think Simmons and Sertan would be a last option.
Yeah.
Just because I don't think you're going to get the value out of the safety position that you would want. Whereas with like Sutton and Judy as wide receivers, you're going to get a higher draft value for the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
But you also have like Garrett Bowles. I think off the year he's had this year, you could probably get better value from him this year than you could have last year. Maybe there's the potential of moving on from Ben Powers or Mike McGlinchey and getting rid of those contracts or something. I
not this early,
right? I don't think that like Surtain's obviously not going to go anywhere unless you're getting like 2 firsts. At the same time, I don't think Simmons is going anywhere, but there are a lot of options for players that I think will be gone or traded.
The fact of the matter is the Broncos have a lot of money they have to get off the books.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to make some tough business decisions that are going to be painful for the locker room, certainly, especially if they were to move someone like a Surtain or a Simmons. But that might be the tough business decision you have to make. And if we know one thing about the ownership group, they own Walmart. They aren't afraid to make cutthroat business decisions.
Well, you know, and I was
you know, but go ahead, Cam.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Glenn.
Well, I was going to say, like, you know, and these are uncomfortable conversations because we love Surtain, we love Simmons. I mean, Simmons is my favorite. But the Bears have Jalen Johnson, who is their star cornerback, and he's likely going to be moving on. So if the Broncos approached the Bears and said, you know, we have a guy and we're valuing him at 2 first-round picks, then they throw in the 12th pick, and then they have other assets that they throw in there. I mean, that could all of a sudden be a very attractive package that they throw out at the Bears. My one concern about taking the hit all in the first year and is undoubtedly what's going to happen is that we would be terrible and then have a draft choice that we've traded away to move up to get our quarterback. So like even the following year when we have the money to spend, we won't have any of these, you know, top tier first round picks to just use that. We would have to rely completely on free agency.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why, not to bring their quarterback discourse, if you will, back again, I feel like, but I feel like that maybe your best course of action is trading for Justin Fields. Like, I think that maybe like your best course of action would be trading for him and not involving your first round pick, right? And not involving your first round pick, because the moment you do that, the moment you don't involve your first round pick with that is when a lot of options are on the table, right? A lot of options are on the table where you can take your wide receiver, or you can take a defensive piece. You could take an interior defensive lineman. You can take maybe a dominant pass rusher, right? Which, you know, even if George Payton, you know, said that they may not target, you know, some players in, you know, wave, you know, one of free agency, I will say they are definitely lacking in edge, like a very dominant, you know, number one edge rusher. So I wouldn't be surprised if, let's just, you know, play, you know, tinfoil hat here. If George Payton stays, there's a certain player that's going to be hitting free agency who's got some ties to George Payton, was down there in Minnesota by the name of Danielle Hunter. So Danielle Hunter, you know, would be certainly maybe a name to watch in free agency. And we also know that even if maybe not in the first wave of free agency, it's also worth pointing up that this is not just a Broncos thing, but an NFL thing. NFL teams will fill their needs in free agency before the draft. That means some of those teams maybe inside the top 10 maybe are going to change the view of some of what they actually view because of what they did in free agency.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought up Danielle Hunter, man. That makes a ton of sense. The question is, can you afford him? I mean, if the Broncos are willing to make it work financially, and they've got cash, they can make it work, then I think that they should do it, because Danielle Hunter could be a true difference maker on the defensive line. He is getting a little bit up there in age. I feel like he's been in the league since 2015, I want to say, but still, if you could get a true dominant pass rusher who's coming off of a double-digit sack season, you got to do it. And Kirk Cousins, to touch on Bill's points a little bit there, I strongly feel like Kirk Cousins is going back to Minnesota. It makes a lot of sense. They kind of realized in these games without him that, oh geez, maybe the grass isn't greener on the other side. Maybe Kirk Cousins actually is the glue that's kept this team together over the last few years, and maybe we actually do appreciate continuity a little bit here.
Yeah.
So I think that both sides kind of realized, okay, we need each other. We're going to make this work.
Yeah.
So I kind of going back to Minnesota.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to get into the Peyton and Penner press conferences.
The
P's.
Sounds like a law firm.
Charmed. I saw a good amount of the press conferences. I didn't see all of them. I didn't know if you guys wanted to just hit like talking points or hit the main points. I know that Gage, you had been talking about with what Peyton had said, there might be a change at center.
Yes. So there were 2 young players that George Payton identified directly and said that those players are starting level players in the NFL. And those 2 players are Riley Moss, who the Broncos traded up to get and highly coveted in last year's draft, and Alex Forsyth, the 7th round center out of Oregon, who I really liked in training camp. He played really, really well. I liked him coming out of the draft. I felt like the fact that he went down to the 7th round, I want to say it was because of injuries or some other outside factor that dropped him that low, because he wasn't a 7th round worthy player whatsoever. I was quite high on him coming out of the draft. So, but Riley Moss is a big one here, I feel like, too, because he could be maybe the Broncos' answer at the number 2 boundary corner spot. And then pivoting back to Alex Forsyth, Lloyd Cushenberry is an impending free agent at center. The fact that George Payton went out of his way to mention Alex Forsyth kind of tells me that he could be the Broncos' plans for their future at center. And that could be one of those painful decisions that the Broncos have to make. We can't afford to pay you, Lloyd. Sorry. Go get paid. Go get your bag. Good for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Those 2 names really did stand out. And, speaking of Riley, Payton does need him to hit. I'm talking about George Payton, because he gave up a 3rd round pick to move up to select him. So there's a lot riding on that selection personally for George Payton.
What's the famous meme that people say, go out and get Cooper DeJean? Well, you have Cooper DeJean at home, and that's Riley Moss, right? I think that but still though, Riley Moss could be enough of a recruiting pitch to where the Broncos could even revamp the cornerback room, because cornerback room is still very much a need. So they actually can still go out and get Cooper DeJean, as far as then use Riley Moss as a recruiting pitch to bring in a guy like a Cooper DeJean. Because he's an absolute gamer. But let's not sell ourselves short though. Moss found himself in the exact same role and responsibility of what Cooper DeJean was, and he's a playmaker. And I think that coming from Iowa and some of the plays that you saw, at least at the tail end of this last season, he's a gamer, man. Like, he is always around the football, and that is one thing you can always say about him. He's always around the football. And I think the thing that was just so frustrating is, coming from the system, that Iowa system, you get guys like Michael Ojemudia, who really didn't pan out all that well in Denver. And of course, the guy that I think really compares rather favorably coming out of college, and that was Josh Jackson from Iowa. I think that Riley Moss putting himself in a much more favorable situation, I think it's really putting himself where he's a guy where you can talk about a guy that is also be super flexible no matter where you play him. And if they do lose some depth pieces out of the safety position, he's also a guy that you could also put maybe in like that's that playmaking safety role, possibly as your 3rd safety at times. So I think that Riley Moss gives you a lot of secondary flexibility.
I'm just proud of Cam. He just
still injured.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but I was just saying I'm proud of Cam. He just talked about college football players for about 5 minutes and not one mention of Nebraska.
Yeah,
and he was actually complimenting Iowa.
I know. This is like there was like some serious restraint going.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the thing is like when you're Nebraska and if you sucked over the years and you finally beat Iowa like last year, and then you finally you have a Brock Purdy son or a brother in the midst, and you actually and you actually throw it away. Literally, you throw it away. The best opportunity you have to beat Iowa again and ruin their chance to go to the Big Ten championship. I'm it just happens. That's the way of the football.
Growth, man, growth.
You brought it up and then he talks about it again.
But it's fine. It's fine though. We got Dylan Raiola. He's going to be the QB1 next year, and he's also winning the Heisman Trophy. And Nebraska's going to win the national championship in 2024. So it's fine. Everything.
Yeah, you just adjust it in the NCAA 24 game, and Nebraska will be great.
Just Matt Rule coach team, buddy.
Cam pulled a Maury Povich. He just told Brock Purdy he's the father. I mean,
That's right.
So there are two players specifically that I want to bring up and see if there was anything talked about in the press conference. One is Drew Sanders. We did see him a lot more in that Raiders game. And the other one is PJ Locke because of how well he played and him being a pending free agent. Do you think that we are going to target, especially signing him? Since they brought up Forsythe, they might not be going after Cushenberry and using that space to go get PJ Locke.
The Drew Sanders angle is the other person that they named along the same breadth of Alex Forsythe and Riley Moss. That was the other guy that they mentioned within that same vein. And I'll tell you what, he is a fascinating player because, coming into with what we were able to talk about, he found himself in the conversation we were having about like a Baron Browning type talent, a guy that can play inside and outside. And I think that, if you look at it, I think he offers you so much flexibility. And he made a play in the Chargers game where it was a true sideline to sideline play, like from his linebacker spot. And I think that is exactly what the Broncos have been missing, truly. I mean, having guys like Josie Jewell and Singleton, have been great for linebacker continuity, but you did draft Drew Sanders for a reason. And people were really, really high on Sanders. So much so, and I will say this, so much so that people felt like he was a much better linebacker in the draft class last year than Jack Campbell from Iowa, who went to the Detroit Lions. So it is
in the first round.
In the first round. And so people are really, really high in that building on Drew Sanders.
Yep. And again, I think we've seen some of the growth and development from Drew Sanders as the season's gone on. The early part of the year is where we really saw a lot of those rookie struggles and growing pains. But over the last few weeks, I feel like Sanders has grown into his own a little bit and is somebody that the Broncos could potentially depend on as a more role player in 2024. The question is, can they depend on him or anybody on the roster really as an alpha edge rusher? That is something that remains to be seen. And the answer right now is no.
Another guy too that Peyton mentioned was JL Skinner, and he was pretty much inactive for most of the season, but he did reference the fact that he was like the scout team player of the week multiple times. So he was helping out behind the scenes. So, maybe he's somebody that again, like, is he mentioning these players at positions where we have impending free agents and he's maybe putting them kind of on notice a little bit, with the PJ Locke and the JL Skinners. I mean, PJ, I think has got to be a major priority.
Hey, it's okay. Pinky, he's a Miami fan. They have no quarterback right now, so he has no place to talk.
That's hilarious. As far as JL Skinner is concerned, I actually think that their vision for him long term is a similar vision that what they had for Kareem Jackson entering training camp this year, and that is the dime backer who lingers down near the line of scrimmage and lays the wood on people. Legally lays the wood on people.
We should actually say maybe like a Jamal Adams role.
Yes,
very much
so. Very much so. I think that that's a perfect comparison for that kind of role as a blitzing safety or a dime backer. That is literally what JL Skinner could thrive in, because I know the Broncos do have some questions about him in coverage, but if you have him lurking down near the line of scrimmage as a blitzer, then you don't really have to worry about that.
And if you could get him developed, Gage, in the role you just described as a sixth round pick, that's a major score.
Yeah, 100%.
So straight up, I thought this meant Drew Lock, and I was like, no. And then I saw the E and went, oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Bring him back.
I'm going to buy you phonics for your birthday, because he did say the E at the end. He had the E at the end.
But PJ Locke, again, man, the Broncos have been very complimentary of him. They love him. They don't want to lose him. I think they'd be willing to outbid another team for him. They don't want him to leave, because he's been a big locker room guy as well. I know he's very
Unintended.
popular. Yes, pun intended. I know he's been very popular in that room amongst the group of guys. So if you are losing one of the leaders in that locker room, I think they're envisioning PJ Locke stepping into that role. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's a team captain next year. I really wouldn't.
What about Caden Stearns? Is he going to be back with the team next year, in your opinion?
I think they'll give him a shot. He's going to be, of course, under contract, but with the season-ending injuries in the past 2 seasons, I think that they can't really depend on Caden Stearns moving forward. Anything you get out of him is basically house money.
I almost feel like he would almost find himself in the PJ Locke role, like that he kind of found himself in, last year, what PJ found himself in. Because, I mean, many people expected Caden Stearns to be the guy opposite of Justin Simmons, and moving on from, Kareem Jackson. Well, it ended up being PJ Locke because of due to the injury, to Caden. I will say though, Caden is the wild card of that room. Like, he is the wild card of that room, and I mean that in a positive way. Because if he shows what he's been capable of in games and healthy, he will bring another element of that room that safety room really doesn't have. And that is a guy that is a nice little blend of, what Justin Simmons has, what PJ Locke has, and maybe even a Kareem as well. So, I mean, like, he's really the nice little blend of both, what they can offer, because he can be a true rover for that team in the playmaking game. And I always think about, like, his potential with what he can be in that Dallas game, that interception that he made over with Dak Prescott. I mean, he's a special talent. He's just got to stay healthy. He's just got to stay healthy first and foremost.
Yeah. So one of the other big things that happened over the last couple of days is coach and GM firings for teams that are just like us and sucked it up.
Sucked it up a lot worse than we did.
Yeah, I think there were some that were surprising, like especially for us. I think we were all kind of wondering what in the hell is going on in Tennessee getting rid of Vrabel, because I don't get that one.
I'm going to save some of my opinions on this because I'm going to make a video about this literally when we get off. I'm going to rant about this for about 10 minutes because I don't know what the hell they were thinking. I'm going to swear. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. Getting rid of one of the most established head coaches in the NFL who has built a winning culture in that locker room. They've had 2 down seasons because of poor front office decisions, not having that roster at a level where they could be competitive. They went down to Miami and they beat the Dolphins. They knocked the Jaguars out of the playoffs. And then they thank Mike Vrabel by firing him because he didn't see eye to eye with the GM. Well, maybe you should have went out and hired a GM that had vision with your head coach who's established a winning culture in that damn locker room.
I mean, is this you holding back? Is this Grage holding back?
Was that like, you holding
back? And then when Diana Rossini mentions the fact that they thought it would be too hard to trade him, so they just figured they'd fire him and not get any sort of return on a Mike Vrabel. I mean, they could have gotten
a second for Sean Payton.
Like
crazy.
That to me is the sign of a toxic relationship. Like what you mentioned, Glenn, right there is the sign of a toxic relationship. The fact that they could not that they could not actually trade for him, or they were trying to even do something about it and they couldn't get anything for him, or they tried to trade him first and then they're like, you know what, we tried to trade you, so you know what, I'm really sorry, but we're gonna have to let you go. Like,
actually, I got the impression they didn't even try to trade him, that they just decided that, this might be too much of a pain in the ass. I think we'll just let him go.
And like Vrabel cares. He gets to double dip now between the Titans money and whatever team hires him to be their head coach.
Which
Vrabel's making bank.
Which may often than not may end up being the New England Patriots, because a lot of people have been speculating. Obviously, Glenn, you're close to the vest over there, on the East Coast. But like a lot of people are wondering, like what Vrabel may end up doing. Is he going to end up going to New England? Which, by the way, to the people in the comments, as much as I would love him to replace, Vance Joseph as defensive coordinator, the fact that the Titans made that surprising move of firing Vrabel, he's going to be like number 3 as far as one of the top 3 candidates in every single cycle this So he's going to end up being a head coach in this cycle. So sadly, he's not going to end up being a defensive coordinator, for the defensive Broncos. But what are they saying? What are they saying down there on the East Coast?
Well, we were seeing like some negative comments about Gerard Mayo creeping up, and I almost wonder if they were in anticipation of a divorce with Vrabel and the Titans, because up until then, nobody has said anything negative about Gerard, and he's really kind of been the next in line. I mean, he interviewed for the Broncos, but he was considered really the heir apparent to Bill Belichick, and sure enough, just now there's a fly in the ointment, but the fly in the ointment's also for Belichick himself, right?
I mean, Cam, I see you chomping at the bit. Go ahead and say your thing.
What? Hey, wait, Glenn gave me the layup. I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna dunk it. I'm gonna dunk it with some mayo. I think. So I mean, clearly, if the New England Patriots let go of Jared Mayo, what better marriage than Tennessee with Will Levis? Will Levis, we know, loves Mayo. So I mean, like it's a pretty match made in heaven, if you ask me.
Are we satisfied now? Are we happy? Jesus. All right. Let's see. So just going over what NFL.com. Vrabel was there for 6 seasons, 54 of 45, 3 trips to the playoffs, and 1 AFC Championship game appearance. And they let him go.
Beloved by players in that locker room. You listen to the rants that both Taylor Lewan and Will Compton went on. They both said, listen, we both have mad respect for Amy Adams Strunk, the Titans owner, but they made a big mistake. And I could not agree more with this, man. What the fact of the matter is, the Titans, if you are going to hire a GM, you need to make sure that GM is going to be on the same page for how you want to build your team long-term than what Rand Carthon, the new Titans GM, and Vrabel were on, because we've seen what Vrabel has done works. There are some downsides to Vrabel as a head coach, certainly. Being a defensive-minded head coach, you're going to cycle through offensive coordinators. They've lost 2 to becoming head coaches, and then 1 they had to fire because he sucked. So that is one downside to the Tennessee Titans, but I think this is another testament to just how unstable the Titans ownership and front office situation is. And just like that last comment up there, ownership matters. And the Adams family has been the Adams family.
That's right.
But that family has been notorious as one of the worst owners in NFL ownership in NFL history, from when Bud Adams exiled the team out of Houston to now this crap. I mean, this is embarrassing.
Well, you would have thought they would have fired him tomorrow, considering it's Wednesday.
Right. And if all goes according to plan for Vrabel and the Patriots, I mean, like, Vrabel has the chance to do one of the funniest things, and that would be have Arthur Smith back on his staff in New England. Like, so it would not shock me if Arthur Smith rejoins Vrabel on his staff, no matter where he goes, whether it is New England or, whatever, because we have seen that, I will say Arthur Smith, he may not be head coach material, but he is a rather solid, coach. And so if he goes to New England or whatever team, for that matter, and they need a running back, don't be surprised if Derrick Henry follows.
Yep. It's funny because I know the media doesn't like Arthur Smith at all, but players will actually tell you they love Arthur Smith, and he's like one of the best coaches on just a human level that you could play for. So I don't know, man. I think that Arthur Smith being drugged through the mud by the NFL landscape the way he has is almost unwarranted. No, he's not head coaching material. He's not good at managing personnel, but again, as an offensive mind, when he has a quarterback who he can trust, not named Desmond Ridder or Marcus Mariota, Arthur Smith has had success in the NFL as an offensive play caller. And so I think he absolutely deserves another shot to be in that role. And under Vrabel, it makes too much sense. So, yeah, man, this could be a scenario where both Vrabel and Arthur Smith are having the last laugh at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, with Arthur... I was going to say, with Arthur Smith being the son of the founder of FedEx, it's ironic that he got shipped out of Atlanta. But I could see
if you saw it or not, but when NFL.com or when the NFL Network announced that Arthur Smith was fired, literally right afterwards, they were showing like the FedEx Air and Ground Players of the Week. They showed that graphic right afterwards. Yeah.
Well, I think it's worth tracking where this guy ends up, but
so obviously Arthur Smith got fired. Just in case anybody wasn't following along, Arthur Smith is gone. Ron Rivera also got let go.
Yeah, that one was time. Yeah.
Now, I am looking at the NFL website, right? And they always put down like head coach GM interviews. They got all these interviews for head coaches for the Panthers, for the Chargers, the Commanders. The only team that doesn't have any head coach interviews, just general manager interviews, is the Raiders.
Yeah, and maybe
they have no head coach listings at all for
and maybe that's telling in and of itself, right? Maybe that's telling to the fact that maybe they already know that Antonio Pierce is going to be their head coach. They'll still honor, interviewing candidates and whatnot, but maybe that's sort of telling that maybe Antonio Pierce will be, and rightfully, I will say, the coach for the Raiders. I think I'm more surprised with the Washington Commanders. The fact that, for one, Josh Harris has gone all out. Apparently he brought in a guy from the Golden State Warriors, that's not been in, the game, I guess. And he's been in TV. He brought him out and, created a role for him over there, and kind of gone all out and reshaped that entire organization. And it seems like they're going to, be rather aggressive. And so I think it would also be really smart if you're Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, you have a lot of history with the Los Angeles Chargers, of course, or I should say the San Diego Chargers at that point. But I think that, from the Chargers being rather poor with the Dean Spanos, and I don't know if the Dean Spanos stuff has been resolved between he and his family and ownership. I think that should be a little bit of a turnoff. So if I'm Harbaugh and I want to go back to the NFC and the Harrises have that money, I would actually go out. I would go to the Washington Commanders team. And plus, you've got some wide receivers and talent over there, some defensive front over there. I would actually think that Washington would be a really solid place for him, down there. So, but as far as the interviews, I'm surprised they didn't interview the janitor. They interviewed so many people, general managers, and, requested so many head coaches. I'm surprised they didn't put a request in for the, for at least the janitor.
Right. Washington's aggressive, man. You got to give them that. As far as Harbaugh is concerned, that'd be funny if both the Harbaugh brothers were coaching both of the Maryland teams. That would be just a kind of funny little wrinkle there. But also, I don't know if Jim Harbaugh wants to go to the NFC. I don't know if he wants to risk playing his brother in the Super Bowl again. He said on the record that was not an enjoyable experience for him, and I don't think he wants to do that again. So I think he might want to go to the AFC.
Cam for Commanders head coach. Woo!
That means they got a race. Let's go.
I'm assuming this tracker is going to update daily. There's no mention of Jim Harbaugh on here. There's no mention of Mike Vrabel. I'm assuming it'll update. The only person that has an interview with every team right now is Dan Quinn, and then Ben Johnson is on three of the teams.
Chargers, Panthers, and who else?
Commanders.
Okay. I think if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm going to the Chargers. I mean, if you've got the opportunity to work with Justin Herbert, I understand it might be a little bit fool's gold because of the poor ownership situation, but Justin Herbert needs an offensive-minded head coach. He desperately needs that. However, they did also interview Kellen Moore, who would be an in-house hire. So I think Kellen Moore,
Giff.
Yeah, and Giff as well, who served as their interim for the final few games. So I think if the Chargers were to go in the direction of a young offensive mind, why not the one that Justin Herbert's already been working with in Kellen Moore? And that wasn't really the problem for the Chargers last year. For most of the year, I mean, once their wide receiving core was decimated down to basically Quentin Johnston and nothing else, that's when the Chargers kind of went off the rails a little bit. But when they had their wide receiving core with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen intact for the first few games, that Chargers passing attack was looking potent and was looking like a very passable unit. We all know that the main issues for the Chargers were defensive issues with their defensive genius head coach and Brandon Staley. So I feel like Ben Johnson's top destination should be the Chargers. I'm still of the opinion that if Buffalo underachieves in the playoffs, they should fire Sean McDermott. They should do a John Fox to him. And if that's the case, then if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm absolutely going to Buffalo to work with Josh Allen. But that's only if Sean McDermott gets John Foxed.
James Farrell says Vrabel to the Patriots. Don't think that's going to happen. I still think Vrabel would make more sense in Atlanta, but $10 says that stupid Josh McDaniels goes back to Belichick and the Patriots.
And Dave Ziegler
what other
maybe
does he have?
The GM Dave Ziegler maybe going back there as well if Belichick, as has been reported, gives up his hold on personnel, and just says that he'll coach the team if they allow him back.
Breaking news.
That'd be
Broncos
hilarious.
Fire, Sean Payton.
Hired Jim Harbaugh and
Get the whole band back together.
God. Oh, that'd be.
No,
I'm not
thank
gonna
you.
lie. For me, that'd be nightmare fuel. I want to see where this Sean Payton thing plays out. I think that the foundation has been laid, and I'm ready to see it get built. I think that things are going in the right direction, despite a lot of pessimism. I feel like from Broncos country. I see it on Twitter. I see it in my YouTube comment section. I think a lot of Broncos country is unpleased
Facebook.
with the direction.
Ooh.
Oh, I don't even go there. I literally
go
do
on
not
Facebook.
go there.
No.
Nope,
Yeah.
I don't do it. I don't do it.
Yeah,
But I feel like there's just so much pessimism. Go ahead, Cam.
I see it all the time too. I mean, my mentions were kind of flowing, here and there, especially when I don't know if it was after the Chargers game or after the Raiders game. It was when I basically tweeted about the direction of this team. When I tweeted that, I saw so many people that were like, nope, I was not happy with the head coach. I'm sure I actually shared it with you, Gage. You saw some of those comments. Like it's kind of ridiculous that after 8 years, and I get it, after 8 years and everything that's been boiling over, I get that pessimism would be starting to settle in, but let's be a little bit reasonable. And also, let's give a coach who has won a Super Bowl, has a 65% winning percentage, or above 60% winning percentage. Oh, some patience, and all the idea that he's going to, get his quarterback. Cause he didn't handpick Russell Wilson. He handpicked the Denver Broncos. Let's keep that straight. He handpicked the Denver Broncos and ownership. And
but he handpicked the Broncos to fix Russell Wilson.
Okay. So I'm going to say this up front. We love that everybody has opinions.
Yes, I
But
apologize.
at some point,
You know
it
what they
gets
say-
annoying as hell, and we have to mute you.
You know what they say
Because
about opinions?
otherwise, we're on the phone all day like, you're stupid. They did this because of this. No, you're an asshole because they did this because of this. I can't do that all day.
So you're out of the group chat?
I'm out of every group chat. There's not even an MHRT one because Bill ruined it.
I know, like anyone out there.
The fact that our MHRT group chat went from 20 people down to 4.
Now it's just us 4.
Yep.
And if you think about it, a guy with a flip phone killed our group chat. Think about that for a minute.
Listen, I love that everybody has an opinion, but at
Yes.
some point, the negativity just gets you, and you're like, fuck, and you just gotta shut it all off.
It's funny because I'm actually the most optimistic about where this team's heading in a long damn time, man.
Yeah.
Aside from the false optimism that I think everybody had when
Welcome,
Russell
Joe.
Wilson came in. I think that was all a mirage. But outside of that, man, I never believed in the direction of this team under Vic Fangio after 2020. I never believed in the direction of this team under Vance Joseph. This is the first time I've actually believed in the foundation and direction that this team has built since Gary Kubiak, quite frankly. So for me, this is some of the most optimistic I've ever been covering this team or being a fan of this team since I've started covering the team. So for me, I've got a lot of optimism with this.
Yeah. Well, this is the first, if you're actually looking at it from the head coach, this is the first time the Broncos have had a head coach like this since Mike Shanahan. And so people like this should be happy. People should be happy about the fact that a coach like Sean Payton, who has, of course, the pedigree of like a Mike Shannon coming from the same university. But I mean, like, hey, you should be happy with the direction of this team and happy with the fact that Sean Payton has the blessing of ownership, right? I think that's the underrated part of this, the blessing of ownership, the fact that, all of this has been transpiring and he's got the blessing of ownership. So we're in really good hands. We're in really, really good hands.
Yep. I could not agree more.
So now that we've completely pissed off half of Broncos country,
I'd say about an eighth.
No, more like 75%. Like 30. Anything else that we want to cover? Anything else that we have not covered that you guys want to?
This weekend's game. Oh, wait, never mind. No, I had to bring it down. Had to go negative.
That hurt right there.
Don't tell Sean Payton that, because he'll fight.
All I have to say is, please, Jordan Love, do the Lord's work and get rid of these Dallas Cowboys now so we don't have to listen to their fans.
Super Bowl predictions. Who do you got in the Super Bowl?
Ravens,
not winning,
49ers.
Just who do you got in it?
Yeah, I got Ravens and basically the colors of the Super Bowl logo. So Ravens and 49ers.
Yeah, a rematch of the Harbaugh Bowl without one of the Harbaughs.
Okay, I'll be the only different one. I'm going Browns-Lions.
What the?
Ooh, that's spicy.
Mike just went back to the 50s.
I'm more confident in the Browns than I am the Lions, but Browns-Lions.
If the Browns,
I think both of those guys get bounced in the first round.
If the Browns make the Super Bowl, Joe Flacco is an instant Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
I don't know, because you have the Browns facing the Texans, and I don't think the Texans can hang with the Browns defense.
I'm just saying. If Joe Flacco.
Let's see what CJ Stroud can do, man.
I'm just saying, Joe Flacco goes to the Super Bowl. I mean, like, he had his ridiculous run, but like if he does it again, he leads the Browns over to the Super Bowl. That's instant Hall of Fame material, especially given the fact about Stefanski probably winning Coach of the Year, and he did it with like 5 quarterbacks. So like, also it would put quite the conundrum. Which, okay, if this is why you're picking the Browns to go to the Super Bowl, I completely respect it, because if the Browns do win the Super Bowl and they win it with Joe Flacco, they officially have a conundrum on their hands, with the situation of, not that they probably don't already, but they officially have a conundrum of the fact that Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than that other.
I love it. I love it so much. But here's the even funnier thing about that. If the Browns went to the Super Bowl, that would basically mean that they went into Baltimore and beat the Ravens. Joe Flacco going back home and breaking the Ravens' heart on a Super Bowl run. That, I'm not going to lie, that would be poetically fun, but I despise the Browns organization and I don't want them to win a Super Bowl. But at the same time, I would like them to be in that bind where, oh my God, we screwed up. Joe Flacco's playing better than Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
That is a true definition of poetic justice right there.
Why pick the Browns?
As far as the Detroit Lions are concerned, though, I just don't know how well they match up against the Rams, but we'll see what happens there. That's going to be a fun game. A lot of juice and storyline in that one.
Their defense is so up and down. That's why I'm more confident in my Browns pick than the Lions, because I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So with that, we want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. Make sure that you check out all the other shows on the MHRT Network. We have shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the Neighborhood every game day. Obviously, the Neighborhood and Elevation Orange aren't going to be really doing anything with the Broncos because Broncos season is done. We'll update you if there's any other games you're going to do, like the Avs or Nuggets or anything like that. Not Rockies, because
they suck.
Nope. I'm not live streaming baseball.
They're poverty.
That's like trying to figure out how to live stream a NASCAR race. I'm not doing that.
Oh, look, they're making a left turn.
But yeah, make sure you check out everything else on the MHRT Network. And of course, subscribe. But the easiest way and the best way to push the network forward is to hit that thumbs up on the videos. Make sure you hit that. We would greatly appreciate it. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country, at least the majority of you. And we will talk to you guys later. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street. Bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out.